Hi there, folks. So, yes, if you're a parent who's got guilt issues because of how you maybe have lashed out at your children, join the club. I know that feeling, especially over the last couple of months where we're working from home. A lot of folk are working from home, so are the kids because they've got to do their school from home. And picture a scenario in a Zoom meeting, or you just come off a Zoom meeting, you've been talking to your boss and your co-workers, and you're trying to figure out how to get through this new normal, and feeling the pressure, feeling the stress, coming up with ideas. And the next minute, your child comes and says, "Can you please help them with long division?" And now you've got big strategic issues on this side, and now you've got to go and quickly remind yourself of your school mathematics and understand how to do long division so you can hopefully teach your child this. And that's the hair that breaks the camel's back. And the next minute you're lashing out at your child, because you can't lash out at your boss. Why? Because you'll get fired. And before you know it, 20 minutes later, you're going, "Oh, my soul, I'm really a bad parent." And you feel this guilt wash over you. Now, what can happen is, if we are not working with this guilt, what can happen is we end up going into a downward spiral, because it's like shoving it under the carpet, and the more you shove under the carpet, it eventually becomes a mound, and you trip over that mound and you actually hurt yourself. The same with guilt. If we are hiding from that guilt, we end up becoming guilty of feeling guilty, and it goes into this downward spiral towards shame. And Brené Brown actually sums up guilt and shame beautifully. She says guilt is "I made a mistake." Shame is "I am a mistake." So to avoid heading into that shame, it's about looking at this guilt and maybe seeing it as a messenger, not a messenger that's coming to hammer you, because that's what we can do. We can feel hammered by this guilt. It's a messenger that really tells us, listen, what you did there was a deviation from your values of how you'd like to be as a parent. And I feel that is a beautiful sign, because if we are feeling guilt, it's telling us that we actually do care and that we would like to do things differently. And this reinforces our self-awareness. What can I do differently next time when I'm in the same scenario? And simply in this process, we are giving ourselves a minimal chance between stimulus and response, and maybe we will, instead of reacting, we say, right, I will get to that just now. Let me just finish off what I'm doing now. And you'll find that you don't go into that reactive nature. Now, alongside this is working with self-forgiveness, because if we do not forgive ourselves for the mistakes we've made, we're going to find that it's going to be very difficult to live a full human experience, because being human is about making mistakes. It is about having the pain of guilt and the joy of making our children happy. That is the full experience of being a parent. And self-forgiveness is vital in terms of us forgiving ourselves, so that we can then do the next thing. And that is to actually ask our children for forgiveness where we did make that mistake of lashing out when it wasn't called for. And I've done this with my daughters for a long time, where I've said, listen, I'm sorry. I can see I upset you. I acknowledge their feelings. And yes, I'd love to say that I've never done it again, but I have still sometimes gone back into that process, and I've been mindful not to hammer myself even more and say, oh, I just did it again. Just follow the same process. Okay, I made a mistake. Self-forgiveness. Will you forgive me? And what I have found is that it's happened less and less often. And through this process, I find that by asking for forgiveness, I'm also releasing that pressure of that guilt, and it avoids me going into that downward spiral. And finally, equally as important, is about trying to reduce the stress and the pressure that leads to the guilt, and especially in this environment we're in now, where it is volatile and uncertain. Within our subconscious, there's a part of our brain that is scanning the environment for threats, and uncertainty is a massive threat. So is volatility. And what happens is we actually go offline. There's an amygdala hijack that happens, and we reduce our thinking. Our left prefrontal cortex goes offline, and we go into this immediate response of fight or flight, which is part of the lashing out. And in order for us to reduce that stress within our subconscious, it is vital we take time out for ourselves. And yes, I realize as a parent to toddlers, it's difficult, because even if you're sitting on the loo trying to just take time out for yourself, they'll be knocking at the door. So if you have got a co-parent or somebody that can just entertain the kids for a bit while you take time out for yourself, become present, focus on your breathing, spend time in the garden, just do something that you are present to yourself. What happens is you'll find that it really does reduce that stress, and you'll find that you're less reactive the next time. And alongside that presence, there's also presence for the children. What I've noticed now, my time can become pretty crazy, because whereas in the past you kind of have this 8 to 5 or whatever times you work, now because we're working with technology, it's always available to do the work. I've noticed people are working later into the evenings, on weekends, it is vital that we make sure we take time out to be present for those children. And I've had to do this, and I notice the sign is when my daughters come hovering around me and I'll be working, I go, Cole, time, drop everything, go and be with them. And it's amazing that difference, how my state of well-being feels better. I notice they feel calmer, and then they'll go off and do their own thing, and then I can get on with whatever I want to do. So those are just some thoughts, folks, and until we chat again, take care and stay away.